Welcome to Unit 7 of AI for Marketing and Sales. Today's topic is AI for Analytics, Forecasting, and Prediction. My name is Dan Gretsch, and along with Nicole Donnelly and Jeff Cooper, we are the lead instructors of this course, and really excited to share with you how you can leverage data and analytics and using AI tools. So our goal with all of our sessions is to provide you 5 things. One is the context, what a business leader we believe really needs to know about using AI for business. This includes things like bias and source of truth and other things. It's not just about the tools. We do cover the tools, but we also cover the skills you need to be able to use those tools effectively as a marketing doer. We also talk about some of the challenges around hallucination, security, bias, copyright, ethics, the end of humanity. And we also want to give you some inspiration, often coming from either big companies or small, about how you can use this today to save time or make money. This course is built for both the business leader and the marketing doer, and we like to remind you each week that AI, especially AI for images, video, audio, is still kind of kludgy in early days. It's a little further along in the text and the large language models, but doesn't always necessarily isn't always easy to use, especially on the first try. Today we are in AI for analytics, prediction, and forecasting. It is a session that's really geared towards the business leader. Over the course of these sessions, we've done kind of hard implementation sessions around AI for text, AI for images, and AI for audio video. This is really more kind of how do you run your business better leveraging AI. Now, for those of you who are brand new and haven't been here to the sessions yet, I did want to just give a very quick summary of what we've covered so far as we head into today's learning lessons. So we started this journey defining what is artificial intelligence. Artificial intelligence is essentially machines supporting humans in the creation of content and strategy. And one of the primary ways that you can interact today, at least, with those machines is something called a prompt. So you type in a prompt and you basically give instructions or information and context that the machine can then use. And our overall perspective has been, it's not a question of AI versus human, it's really a question of AI plus human versus human alone. And we have been advocating this idea of a cyborg. We should all become people who are AI powered, and leverage our particular strengths and particular knowledge as a human being to make the tools work better. And especially today, this theme of partnering to use AI to help you get greater insights from your data, but not relying entirely on AI to get you there, is a theme that we've been building throughout. We've also talked a lot about various different tools, from ChatGPT to AI PRM to Jasper to Midjourney to Azure AI to Copilot to Duet. And we'll be introducing a few more tools today that are more analytics oriented as we go on. Our goal today is really to really focus around the idea of predictive analytics, what it is, and how you can convert data into insights. We're going to talk about a day in the life of a data scientist at Disney, how that looks, and some of the special considerations that come from being a woman in a STEM field, which is never easy. And then we're going to give you an introduction to accessible AI tools for analytics and prediction. These are low-cost tools, relatively easy-to-use tools that you can immediately use to upgrade your current use of data and analytics. As you'll recall, we always ask for you to do some homework. And we invited you to leverage the Jasper tool or ChatGPT to define your brand voice and create your brand story. And so we would love to hear from you in the chat if any of you guys were able to use AI to help you with some of those higher level aspects of marketing. Now, one of the reasons we asked you to do this is if you do not define your brand voice and your brand story, AI will not be able to figure that out for you. And the content, the text, the images, the videos that you create using AI will not be on brand. And so a big part of prompting and prompt engineering is giving AI the data it needs to be able to do good work on behalf of you and your company. So each session, we've talked about your interactions with AI. Let me see. I'm going to stop sharing for 1 second. I'm going to end the first poll, and then I'm going to start the new poll. Stand by. Okay. So each week we've asked you, are you using AI and how much and which tools and how much has it saved you? And now you're going to actually get to see what we've been waiting for, which is from session 1 to session 6, the evolution of your usage of these tools. And we're going to keep measuring this as kind of the primary ROI is we want you to use these tools and have it save you time and make you money. So what you'll see from session 1 to session 6 is that gray bar, which is not using AI at all, is shrinking dramatically, while the frequency of use for business and personal is growing. And so you can see that, gosh, nearly more than 2/3 of you are now regularly using AI for both business and personal use. What we're also seeing is that you're increasing the frequency of usage. That 10+ category, that kind of light purple, and the 6 to 10, the darker purple, has really grown a lot, to the point where more than half of you are now using ChatGPT 6+ times a week. In terms of which tools you're using, it started out where you were heavy ChatGPT users, and you still are very heavy ChatGPT users, but you're now folding in other tools, especially ones for AI for images, AIs for search, and AI for video. You can see that the AI for video, it remains kind of the edge case for many of you, and I know that that's a harder set of tools to use. But what we really like is just the increase in usage of these tools inspired by these sessions. And then finally, my favorite stat, which is how much money are you making or saving? And you'll see that none of you reported at the beginning saving tens of thousands of dollars, except for the 3 of us, Jeff, Nicole, and I. But now we see that 2% of you are reporting that, 7% of you are in the thousands, and 19% of you are in the hundreds. And overall, exactly, from 8 and 10 of you not saving any money, now it's to 7 and 10 of you. And I actually did a very, very rough calculation. This is kind of not scientific, but whatever. I basically took the number of people who've attended all of the sessions, and then I divided it by the number of people in session 6 who reported using, saving in these amounts of money. And we came to a very rough number, which I actually think maybe even an underestimate, which is that the average person who joined one of these sessions has saved more than $5,000 just by showing up, getting inspired, and doing the homework. And what's so exciting as a marketer is we understand that we're kind of talking at you a little bit. When you have hundreds of people attending a session, you can't do that one-on-one implementation. And we've heard loud and clear that that's really what you want. And we're going to talk about that as kind of what our next steps will be. But it's really gratifying, in real time, seeing you guys saving thousands of dollars on average. And that is the potential of this tool, these tools when used well. So kudos to you guys for coming here, showing up, dedicating yourselves to finding out how to use them in your business, and then actually implementing them to save time and make money. And Jeff and Nicole, before we move on, I mean, this is sort of our money shot. This is sort of the moment where we get to see the actual fruits of this hard work. I would love for you to just kind of react to to that number, and just the work that we're doing together to try to help these companies and these participants save time and money.
It's amazing. It's very gratifying to me to see that this is actually useful and helping people's businesses in a very real way. And I think I would just encourage, if you're still in that 70%, to think very carefully about how you can improve your processes. Because I do believe that every company, even if it's not producing imagery or content, can use these tools to streamline and make things more efficient. So it's an awesome start. It's very gratifying to see. And I would just encourage everybody to not stop when these lectures are over and keep pursuing that.
Yeah, I would agree. And to go back and rewatch whatever you think would be most relevant for you. Save the links, review the links. But I mean, the amount of time that we've saved, and for me being engaged in this course and going kind of refining things every week as we go, has really helped our team too. And gotten everybody on the same page about what tools we want to use. And so I appreciate that. Like personally, that number is so much higher. And it could be for everybody too. I think everyone in here could get the value of an employee for the year, and so when we see this over, if we asked everybody a year from now, I think it'd be closer to 30,000 on average. Because if you took an employee's wages, even at the lowest level, then I think you're going to save that in the amount of work you're able to do. It's gonna, who knows, in a year it could be even more, because things are changing so fast.
Yeah, and I think
absolutely.
One other thing that Mark actually said in our chat when we were talking about who used Jasper is he said that he hasn't personally used it, but his team is using it. And I actually think that's a great response, because one of the things that I think we find as business owners is when these new technologies come around, it's fairly overwhelming and time consuming to get your head around them, to understand them, to play with them, to run into the brick walls that you hit when you're trying to use Midjourney or you're experimenting with GPT for the first time. So I think one word of encouragement I would give is, one, take a page out of Mark's book, which is culturally get your team interested in these things so that you're not the lone innovator in your organization trying to explore these things. And then the other encouragement I would give you is, just like Nicole said, I mean, she spent years and years really wrestling with these tools to get the value out of them, and now making tons of money doing that. So I would just encourage you to also to power through the hump. It's new technology. You're going to hit roadblocks. It's going to be something you have to practice and get better at, but I can guarantee you there is a pot of gold there.
I love it. And I want to make just a quick, I just heard this earlier today, and I love this kind of framing. It's not about doing things right. It's about doing the right things. And this is where strategy comes in. ChatGPT can be an incredible force multiplier, or it can be a terrible rabbit hole. And part of the goal that we have in working with you is helping you identify what is strategic, right? What are the right things that will grow your business, and then how to leverage AI to get there faster, better, and to do more. I think AI does have the ability to create a lot of noise, and we're going to talk about that here in a second about data. And so I'd really encourage you guys to think really carefully about what you're doing with AI and how it aligns to your bottom line goals, because you do not want to just create more content or work unnecessarily. And so that's kind of a perfect segue into the difference between data and insight. So Neil Postman, one of the great theorists of information, the author of Technopoly, said, "We have transformed information into a form of garbage." And one of the ways to map the detritus of the information age is this statistic here. Worldwide, from 2010 to 2025, we went from 2 zettabytes of data to, we will be by 2025 at 181 zettabytes of data. This is the amount of data created, captured, copied, and consumed. And this statistic predates ChatGPT and generative AI through large language models. I actually think, if anything, there's even more junk content being created. One estimate is that 15% of new songs on Spotify are AI generated, mostly by one company. And so what's happening is there is this incredible surfeit of information, but not necessarily insight. David Schenk, the author of Data Smog, said, "The glut of information no longer adds to our quality of life, but instead begins to cultivate stress, confusion, and even ignorance." That's what today is all about. We do not want you guys to get stressed out by data and information. We want to help you cut through the noise and find things that will help you grow your business faster. And as I hand it over to Jeff and to Annie, I did want to just make this distinction of information versus knowledge. Information is what that statistic is and what those warnings are about. It's just a collection of facts, truisms, it's data, raw data. Knowledge requires analysis and insight. It's the appropriate understanding or application of this information. And you don't need necessarily more data, you need more insight, you need more knowledge. And one of the biggest risks for AI for businesses is that you're going to create and become overwhelmed by a glut of information without insight. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Jeff, who's going to give you a little bit of the necessary context that you need to be able to understand Annie when she joins us. And while he's calling that up, we're going to wrap up the survey here in a sec. So if you haven't yet, go ahead and answer it. We've had about 2/3 of you have participated so far.
All right, let me get my screen shared without sharing you 3 different screens at once. All right, can you see my screen?
Yes.
Awesome. All right, let me skip ahead to the section here. So first we're going to start with our 5 definitions for predictive analytics. Now, I do want to caveat everything with I'm about to say with the idea that as an engineer, I tend to go very deep down the technical rabbit hole. And so today, when we're talking about predictive analytics, that is a very technical topic. We're going to try to keep it high level and useful to you as a business owner or a marketer. And so I'll ask for your forgiveness ahead of time if I start getting a little too geeky with you today. But there are some 5 definitions that we want to make sure everyone is very comfortable with, and we'll walk through them. So first of all, what is predictive analytics? We actually got a lot of questions about this in our last lecture when we were sharing some of this upcoming coursework. So the definition of predictive analytics is this is the use of statistical methods and recently AI to forecast future outcomes based on historical data. So typically the domain of predictive analytics is used in numerical data, but also things like categorical information. How do you label a movie by its genre, et cetera? The second thing, and we'll learn a lot about this with our guest today, is data science. Data science is an interdisciplinary domain that's focused on extracting insights and predictions from data. So you can think of a data scientist a little bit like a business analyst, just on steroids, using technology, working with really large data sets, and using these modern tools like AI to extract insights and useful information from data. The third definition we'll cover today is big data. So what is big data? There's a lot of different numerical definitions of big data. The way I like to think about it is if you've ever tried to do some work on your company and you broke Microsoft Excel, you're probably dealing with big data. So big data is really vast data sets that when you analyze them computationally, you can get a lot of significant information about patterns and trends. The more data you have, like Dan mentioned, usually the better, as long as that data contains the information that you're looking for and is meaningful to your business. Data mining is a technique that uncovers patterns and knowledge from large sets of data. So oftentimes early in the discovery phase, whether you're a data scientist or if you're on a machine learning team, data mining is what you're doing in those initial stages to try to uncover patterns that might be lost in an otherwise large data set. And then finally, we'll talk briefly about feature engineering. So feature engineering is a concept that is relevant to both artificial intelligence as well as data science and predictive analytics. Feature engineering is essentially the process of selecting and transforming variables that you feed into different predictive models. So this is a nebulous concept, but I'll give you guys an example. If you're trying to understand a population and trying to predict the rate of cancer, there's a lot of different information you can work off of. You can look at somebody's age, you can look at their their gender. You might be able to look at their economic status. You might look at their political leanings, but not all of that information is useful. And sometimes those variables are highly correlated. And if you just feed a bunch of junk into a machine, it can produce junk as the output. So there's an entire discipline in this craft that's dedicated to be very carefully predicting or changing variables that go into machine learning models. And that actually becomes very important, especially when we think about things like bias that these machines can produce. So that's just a high level view of a few terms I want everybody to be aware of. And I promise that we will not go down the route in this lecture on how to do feature engineering or teach you guys, things that you may have learned in college about linear algebra or principal component analysis. So let's take a moment to just go over the domain of predictive analytics at a high level. So what is predictive analytics? You can do a lot of different types of analytics. You can use Excel to analyze your business data. You might use other tools to detect anomalies, or you might have systems that automatically do this for your company. And there's a lot of different ways you can apply analytics in your company. The spectrum of analytics really goes from one end that we call descriptive analytics all the way to predictive analytics. And what descriptive analytics is it's essentially what you're probably already doing when you look at your P&L report, or you try to do just very basic analysis of your numbers. It's really just cleaning the data you have and presenting that in a meaningful way. You can think of that as like your sales report that you might review with your CFO or with your board every year. The next evolution of that is something we call diagnostic analytics. So this is actually using your data to detect patterns or trends. So if you were looking at your sales report and you said, hey, wow, our revenue went up 30% year over year. Why did it go up 30% year over year? You might use diagnostic analytics as a domain to look at the differences in your revenue between different products year over year to try to understand meaning or trends behind that data. What we do with predictive analytics is essentially combine all those factors. And predictive analytics is focused on projecting future trends and values based off that historical data. So if you took that same sales report and you then try to do projections for the next business year, you would be doing a form of predictive analytics. So we've been doing this for a very long time. And I think one thing that's important to understand as a marketer or a business owner is this domain is fairly mature and was also very mature before artificial intelligence became very popular. You might have learned back in high school AX plus B, a mathematical trick to fitting a bunch of dots into a line to try to model a set of data. That is a type of predictive analytics that you are doing that doesn't require any kind of artificial intelligence, where people are essentially using math to fit data and create lines of best fit you can use to predict future data. That does not require any kind of artificial intelligence. Even more advanced types of predictive analytics, like clustering models you may have heard of, or some of the tools that the early versions of Amazon and Netflix used to recommend content to you, also didn't use artificial intelligence. We really were just using mathematical principles and statistics that we've had for a very long time to build models that output reasonable results and helped us group data together and predict future values. So you might be asking yourself, well, why are we talking about this if this is a course focused on artificial intelligence? Well, like most things in your business, just like you could write blogs before ChatGPT showed up, you could have done this stuff before. But nowadays, we're starting to use more AI techniques in the act of working through predictive analytics. So an example of this is neural networks. We learned about neural networks as essentially a type of machine that can learn anything based off of reinforcement training. And in the application of predictive analytics, we're starting to use these deep neural networks in the context of the things we were already doing, like that clustering algorithm example, where in the old days, and I say the old days as in 5 to 10 years ago, we would have to do a lot of feature engineering and decide exactly what data points we were going to feed into a clustering model. We'd also have to decide what math we were using. Are we using k-means clustering? What type of statistical methods are we going to use to group these into different groups? And how do we then go through a pretty rigorous process of testing those outputs and retuning our model? Now that we have tools like deep learning networks, we can essentially just teach the model based off of labeled data and send in all the information we have and have those AIs do the same work we were doing before without so much front-end work on things like feature engineering. Okay, so this is getting pretty nerdy, I know, and we're not even a few slides into it. I do want to take a moment to just step back and remind everybody that when we're talking about AI-driven predictive analytics, we are talking about a fairly sophisticated domain. So just like I was saying before, we've been able to do this stuff without AI. If you're familiar with more advanced statistical topics, principal component analysis, clustering algorithms, these are all techniques used by data scientists in these large companies to do predictive analytics. And they don't necessarily rely on AI, but they still are fairly complicated. And so if you're like me and you're not a data scientist in your 9 to 5, you're probably way on the left of the spectrum, where I'm not even concerned about principal component analysis. So I do just want to caution everybody that's in this particular lecture to try before you AI. If you're not already looking at your data or trying to glean insights from your data, it might be pretty jarring to go from where you are today to trying to use really sophisticated AI-driven predictive analytics tools. I think what's going to be really interesting over the next few years is it's possible you may be able to go from the baby crawling on the left to the person flying by skipping a lot of the meat and science in between by using some of these modern tools. So I just want to give a word of caution to everybody in this group. As you start looking at these tools, they may be pulling you into a domain that's fairly technical, and that's okay. I still think you should be looking at your data and trying to use some of the non-AI driven methods to get insights from your information. And it's also totally okay to just jump into the deep end of AI driven analytics. But I think what you'll hear from Annie when she gives us some context on how Disney does these things is it is helpful to have a basic understanding of the non-AI ways that these tools work if you're going to be very, very successful making really accurate, good AI-driven predictive analytics models. So just like we learned with content, you're a better copywriter with AI if you were a good copywriter without AI. The same thing applies to this domain. So where are we today? Well, since predictive analytics itself is such a technical domain in the first place, there are a lot of very low-level tools for doing this kind of work. And when I say low-level tools, I mean code-based tools. These are things like Python libraries or tools that you can use in Java, things that a data scientist at Disney might use every single day in their work. Tools like PyTorch, TensorFlow, scikit-learn, all of these common low-level pieces of software that help you build these tools. For us as marketers and business owners, I think what I would encourage you guys to look out for is to look for tools that are already built for us. Things like business intelligence tools, Tableau, Power BI, Click, some of these systems that already allow you, even without AI, to integrate your information and draw insights and presentations from those, or more basic tools, even like a spreadsheet, Google Sheets or Google Analytics, if you use that for measuring your web data. These tools, like we saw with a lot of other technologies and talking to Microsoft about Copilot, are all incorporating AI-based features that are really going to make these predictive analytics more accessible to you as a marketer or business owner. So if you're a total nerd and you want to go way down the rabbit hole, go get a book on PyTorch and learn Python, and you can do a lot of cool stuff. But if you are a business owner and a marketer, I would really encourage you to be looking out for business intelligence tools or BI tools and just basic tools like spreadsheets that are going to be using more and more of this stuff under the hood so that it's accessible to you and you don't have to learn all the math and science. We can leave that to the data scientist at Disney. And with that, Dan, I think we can call up Annie to give us her story.
Perfect. So if you could go to the next slide, our goal, first of all, welcome, Annie. How are you?
Hi, good. How are you?
I'm doing well. So next slide, please. So I just wanted to introduce Annie Cooper, and you guys might remember when we did the AI for images that we actually fed Annie's real life picture on the left into Midjourney, and then invited Midjourney to adjust the photo to show us what a data scientist looks like. And you can see the long-haired gentleman on the right as it converted Annie from a woman to a man, or at least a woman without a mustache to one with one. It also added glasses. And this kind of speaks to a topic that we're going to tackle a little bit in a second here, which is about data science is a field that's dominated by men. Many of those men are from the US and Europe. Many of those men are white. And so part of our goal, we're funded by the Diversity and Inclusion Office at the Miami-Dade County Mayor's Office, is to bring a diverse set of experts to you, and Annie is one of those. And we really appreciate you being here. So Annie is a senior data scientist at the Walt Disney Company. Her kind of superpower is leveraging data for business decision making, and she's done that in biotech with GSK and Biogen, in finance with Fidelity, and in media now with the Walt Disney Company and their Disney Plus streaming service. She's a graduate of Duke and NC State. And so Annie's going to give us a kind of quick introduction to data science, and then we're going to go into a brief Q&A. And guys, feel free to throw your questions into the Q&A as well if you have anything you wanted to ask Annie about.
Awesome. Thanks, Dan. And thank you all so much for having me here today. So as Dan mentioned, I work today as a data scientist at Disney, and my team focuses primarily on personalization for our entertainment products. So what do we mean by personalization? Basically, our ultimate goal is to be able to give our users the best experience possible. And that means having to take into account the fact that every user is different. Everyone has their own unique tastes and preferences. And we really want to aim to deliver a curated experience that is most relevant to that user, so that we can provide the best experience possible for any given individual. And some examples of that, everyone's playlist is a little bit different, right? So yeah, when we talk about personalization, we have to talk about companies like Amazon and Netflix, who first pioneered the modern personalization platforms. I think you've all probably seen on Amazon the recommended product section, where if you buy something, then all of a sudden Amazon knows all the other products that you suddenly need, even though you didn't know that you needed them yourself to begin with. Or on Netflix, you have these rows that are curated to your title. So just because you watched one movie, it shows you a whole nother list of these other movies that might be of interest to you as well. And so all of these are examples of personalization today. And I think it's also just interesting to note that most modern tech platforms use personalization across their entire platform. So you might notice it in some of these situations, like in these specific rows, that content is curated for you, but it's actually oftentimes a lot more than just that. So the actual content, the titles that go into these rows are curated. The row of those, like the order of those contents in that row is curated. Even the order of all of those rows placed on a specific page can oftentimes be curated to a specific user as well. Even the thumbnail that's shown, all of these things are things that companies aim to try to personalize and create a better experience for an individual user. And when we talk about recommendation engines, there's kind of two main categories of these. So on the left, you can see an example of collaborative filtering. This is kind of the biggest pioneered recommendation engine that Netflix first started. And really, it just takes the assumption that users have similar buying and viewing patterns. So this can be particularly helpful when there doesn't seem to be a clear pattern or relation between content. So it just is really based off of user behavior. So if I watch something like I watched a horror movie and then a comedy and then a cartoon, and all three of those don't seem, related on paper, but then another user also watches that same horror movie and comedy, then we might recommend that cartoon as a recommendation, even though it doesn't seem like that's a natural grouping of those contents. But it's really just based off of user behavior, and then we model people's preferences based off of what other people who are similar to you might also be watching. And then there's also the content-based filtering. So that's really, it's really more about just finding content similarities. So this is more helpful when you actually have a lot of descriptive metadata on a piece of content or a product, so that you can compare these products and descriptions and see, which which contents are actually related to each other, where are the similarities, and then that way, if a user watches one of them, then you can recommend any other similar content based off of those similarities.
Perfect. So I'd love to ask you a few questions, and then Jeff, if you could moderate the chat to see if there's any other questions that are coming up there that we want to add as well before we start talking about the next section, which is going to be on a day in the life. So really what we're trying to do here is we're trying to establish kind of the terms of the trade and get everybody a quick data science degree in 5 minutes. One of the big questions I have is everybody is familiar with two companies that were really the pioneers of personalization. Amazon when it came to books, and then like pretty much everything else, and Netflix when it came to movies. And as you know, Disney Plus wasn't even around when, for years when Netflix and Amazon were created. It's a relatively late entrant to the streaming market. To what extent are you just building off of published research that Netflix and Amazon data scientists created versus creating your own unique models?
Sure, I think that's a great question. I would say that because so much of this research has been published and they've kind of established the status quo of what a recommendation engine should look like, just like I talked about with the collaborative filtering and the user-based recs, that's kind of the basic foundation of how all recommendation engines today are formed. So we definitely build off of that framework. However, the exact data that we have access to from company to company is going to vary immensely. And so we still end up having to develop models that are specific to our use cases, given the data that we have access to and kind of the specific goals that our business unit is trying to accomplish. So while we definitely leverage that research and we follow, a lot of the similar frameworks and patterns that these other recommendation engines use, ultimately the models are our own, and we sort of do our own research and development on those for our given use cases.
And this brings up an issue that I did want to, a lot of the pioneering work in AI is funded by universities, and the research is published, as university research often is. And a lot of the pioneering work in AI was funded by companies, but also published in public journals. And I'm just curious, just for those of us who aren't familiar with data science, as a data scientist, there are some things that you'll publish to the world, and I guess other things that are more proprietary to your company. And how do you figure out if a certain insight, a certain breakthrough, is that something you publish to the world or something you hold back for your own company?
Yeah, I do think it is a fine balance, between what you want to share versus what you want to keep to a company. But I think that it comes down to, how innovative of a solution have you created? Is this something that is truly, a new way of looking at our data, at our models? And is it something that can be leveraged by other companies, right? Or anyone else out there? And so I think you just have to sort of weigh the potential impact to society of like being able to share this with everyone else and letting these other institutions further that research, right? Because a lot of these models are just, one company will develop something and publish that, and then another company will take that and make it even better. And so I think you have to sort of evaluate the potential impact of something that you've invented, and then how innovative that solution really is.
Yeah, and one of the best examples of this, of course, is that the transformer breakthrough, which came out of Google, was the foundational technology for ChatGPT, which ended up being basically its primary rival through Microsoft. So there's this really interesting push and pull and tug. And I would say that this is a big tension right now within just AI broadly. Elon Musk criticizes Microsoft and Google for not being more open source. Meta had its code leaked, and now it's kind of going heavy into the open source space. So you'll start to see a lot of debates about to what extent is this proprietary, company owned, or to what extent is this going to be published. I wanted to make a point that Annie Hannah Paulson said that collaborative filtering, which you were talking about earlier, sounds a lot to persona-based marketing and recommendations. And that is 100% on target. When we teach in our digital marketing class, interest targeting, we actually use the Netflix case study of identifying clusters of interests to help predict what somebody is going to do. And the classic example is folks who tend to like Adam Sandler movies have a much higher likelihood of being people who are in the alt-right have a much higher likelihood of liking Adam Sandler movies. And you'd be like, what? Why would that be? Well, people in the alt-right like funny movies too, and the Adam Sandler movies typically are kind of guy meets girl, guy loses girl, guy gets girl back, which is a very traditional formulation for a comedy. And so they found this incredible, predictive insight that people who are interested in Adam Sandler movies are going to potentially also be more amenable to a conservative message. And that was one of the ways that Donald Trump was able to win the 2016 presidency. And so I did want to, there's a question, I think, in the Q&A. Jeff, you want to go take that one?
Yeah, I think this is actually a really great question. It's from Oliver. Annie, I think there's a general concern that personalization can lead to an echo chamber. And I can personally attest that when I go on YouTube, it's sending me the same. If I click on too many videos, that's all I'm getting for the rest of my experience. From the perspective of a data scientist or some of the work you're doing on personalization, like how much do you think about like that echo chamber effect, and what are the options for combating that in a technical sense?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it's something that we definitely struggle with all the time with all of our models. It's really challenging to try to balance, just trying to continue serving something that we think that the user really wants to watch over and over and over. And trying to balance that with also introducing kind of new content, something that's a little bit more exploratory, just to give them some other options that they maybe wouldn't have known that they were interested in on their own. So it's a really fine balance trying to introduce both of those, just letting it perpetuate the given history and activity that the user exhibits, and then balancing that with introducing new content that they may not necessarily like, but we still want to give them that option. And then I would say that with all of our models, we also try to incorporate some signals from editorial selections as well. So we still have editorial teams that curate what they think are interesting titles, what people are interested in these days. And so we still rely heavily on editorial teams to kind of put that human in the loop, factor to add in some additional titles and contents that we think might be interesting. And so it's a fine balance between all of these things and trying to really optimize for a user's personal preferences, but also what we think they might like, plus what else is out there.
That's interesting. So it's, even though you're using some of the coolest technology in the world, you're still using people to help drive some of these suggestions.
Yes, I think that is a very important takeaway that I know Dan mentioned earlier as well. All of this is ultimately about combining AI and humans, right? It's not just relying on AI alone.
Now, how AI and data science are not synonymous. A lot of the math that the recommendation engines that Netflix and Amazon built was 19th century math. And so could you just talk about how you use AI and AI tools in your work as a data science at Disney?
Yeah, so I think, like Jeff mentioned earlier, data science kind of is and maybe, I guess I'm getting ahead of myself into the next section, but really it's a combination of all of these tools, right? We have to leverage math and statistics, but we also need to be able to scale that to big data and use programming and computer science to enable us to do that. And kind of the combination of all of that ultimately is how we can build these AI solutions that are, learning and better predicting on these models that originally were developed to begin with.
Perfect. Yeah, the lesson here, guys, is use data in your business, and AI tools can help you use data in your business, but you don't necessarily need to use AI to be able to use data in your business. So now we want to kind of talk about, how this works at one of the largest companies in the history of the world, Disney.
Yeah, so this is what I was speaking to earlier is, data science is kind of the intersection of all of these foundations. At the base of everything, of all of these models and predictive analytics, AI is math and statistics. That's how, all of these models are built. And the issue with that is, with traditional just math and statistics, is that in order to actually leverage these and apply these concepts to big data and find patterns and relationships that are meaningful beyond, what you can do in an Excel sheet, we actually need to be able to have the computer science background to actually leverage these tools and develop the programs that allow us to run these mathematical models on such large data sets. And of course, I think with any discipline, really, there is the aspect of having business domain knowledge as well, because without that guidance, we don't know what to look for. If you just throw us a giant data set of numbers and formulas, we still need some direction to determine what we should even be looking for, what we're trying to model. What is the actual use case for leveraging any of these technologies? So yeah, data science is basically the intersection of all three of these areas. You have to have enough understanding and practice in all three of these disciplines, which really just means that, I'm not an expert in any of the areas alone, but I know enough about all three of them to put something together. Yeah, and so with the actual team, a typical team is composed of all of these different disciplines. So data engineers, they're the people who really build the systems to actually clean and process all of the data. And they do a lot of the work that is involved with like feature engineering, like Jeff was talking about earlier. How do we actually get all of this data into a digestible form that can then be used for modeling? So this is a huge piece of work that is required for modeling that often gets overlooked. But it is, really the fundamental piece of any model and kind of the key to having a successful model as well. Data scientists are typically the ones that are developing the model. So they're actually trying to build out the model to predict outputs for behavior and really optimize for whatever metric we're trying to look for or whatever we're trying to predict for. And then there's also this kind of new emerging area of machine learning engineers. So I think that in the earlier days, we sort of relied on data scientists to just figure out all of these things. But as we're dealing with more and more complex systems and more data, we're starting to see that we need more and more engineering support to actually deploy these models. So these pipelines can get very complex, right? There's a ton of data. Depending on your use case, you might have billions of users. We need to think about latency. We need to think about how regularly we train these models and how quickly we can run inference on these. And machine learning engineers are sort of trying to take that role of ensuring that entire pipeline can be set up from start to finish and can actually deploy something in a production level environment so that we don't have to worry about latency concerns or model drift. And then ultimately there's the product manager, which I touched on earlier, who works very closely with the rest of the team to actually help prioritize business requirements and make sure that the model is doing what we are hoping it to do.
And related, Annie, we had a question from the prior section that's kind of related to some of that, where Dave mentioned this question of, how much do we create a feedback loop here where like the kind of movies we're even producing in the first place are actually just a result of trying to like feed an algorithm, and like, what's the role in the product manager for navigating that type of feedback loop?
Yeah, I think that we try to still have, you know, teams that are dedicated to creation, right? Like the editorial teams, we try to still have them isolated so that they're thinking about, you know, what is the content that we need to be producing. And so while the personalization teams do try to put that content in front of people to get more viewership, I think that we still try to keep some separation so that, you know, the content teams get to do what they think is important and create the type of work that they think people want to see, you know, beyond what the recommendation algorithms are showing people.
And Jose had asked a question kind of about some of the safety issues. Like we've seen personalization go bad. Like there was an example from years ago of a mother finding out her daughter was pregnant because she got an email from Target that predicted that she, based on her shopping behavior, that she was probably expecting. How do you think about, whether it's in the context of Disney or even just personally, kind of creating safety mechanisms to prevent some of those kind of darker sides or misuse cases of personalization?
Yeah, I think that in the earlier days, we were not as aware of, you know, we weren't as careful with those kind of issues. And so we would tend towards sort of throwing in all the data that we had about a specific user. And I think that more and more, because of these issues that we're seeing and the privacy concerns, we're sort of actually moving away from that and trying to use as little information as possible to still be able to customize an experience. And so more and more you'll see that a lot of the, you know, more sensitive data is thrown out of data sets completely. We're trying to, and you know, with some of the bias concerns that we'll get into a little bit later as well, I think that the field is moving towards trying to remove as much sensitive information as possible so that we can avoid these kind of issues arising.
So I want to give Nicole a chance to ask a question, but I just want to, one of the big points we're trying to make, guys, is it takes a lot of money and people to do this right. And, you know, I'm on the same chat for a lot of business owners that Nicole is, and there's just a ton of very small businesses that are trying to create custom solutions leveraging data and AI that if they probably just sat tight for like 6 months, the tools would be built for them at a much lower cost. And just to give you an example, Annie shared with me that she has over 20 people on a team that's dedicated simply on how to organize video content from one ESPN video feed. So the amount of time, money, and resources that really is required to do this well is out of reach for most small businesses, which is a perfect segue to Nicole's question.
Well, and I want to say what Manuel asked on here too as part of this. So his question was, if you, for a company that doesn't have a whole team, and you showed the different types of people on the team, who would you hire first and what responsibilities? If you could hire one person, what responsibilities? And then my question is, if you think that AI will make this analysis more accessible for the average business owner. And so, you know, for people like, we don't have 20 analysts, you know, and we're lucky to have one or a part-time analyst on something. What are you seeing there as far as efficiencies? And if you could hire one person and use a tool, what would you do first?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And I would say if my resources were constrained and I were just trying to add one hire available, I mean, this is probably going to sound like a cop-out, but, you know, I would try to find the person who is the most generalist of all those disciplines that I described. So, you know, there are, whether you call that a data scientist or an engineer, there are individuals who can do all of those things, both from data engineering all the way to model deployment. That being said, I think that I would try to find someone who is well versed enough in all of those areas to understand the capabilities of all of these tools and technologies, but also just comfortable enough interfacing with some of these other products that can do these things for you, right? You don't need someone who's going to code a model from scratch. You don't need someone who's going to be able to deploy that on AWS or Azure or anything like that. You can leverage some of these existing tools, and just knowing the data that you have and knowing the capabilities of what you can do with it is enough to kind of get you started, so that you can then, if you're comfortable sending your data to a third party, they can provide, whether you're trying to do personalization or any other type of modeling, they can send you back the recommendations, and you can kind of, not have to worry about the actual deployment and infrastructure that is required to house a system like that.
Okay, thank you.
Well, we could keep going, and I would love to, but there's, I want to make sure that we end on time and give enough time for Nicole to show off some of the tools that she's going to demo for us. But I did want to take a minute now, and I wanted to talk about, bias in data modeling and in the STEM field. And I wanted to start, with that, that thing that we started with, where we showed that image of you converted from a woman to a man, when we asked Midjourney to take this photograph and turn it into a data scientist. And I was actually really shocked by that, but maybe not surprised. And I just wanted you to reflect on what is it like to be a woman in a male-dominated field?
Yeah, so I would say, it's no secret that minorities are underrepresented, both in my field, and you can see with the Midjourney example, and in the data sets that are actually used to create these models. I've seen this from personal experience, throughout my career. You see it in the documented issues of facial recognition software, Midjourney as one example, but also, in more risky situations where the facial recognition software is being used by police or airport security. These are all very known issues, and it's definitely concerning, right? And I think a good example also is just you see it in resume screening tools as well. Amazon, as an example, they just continued using one of these algorithms because they had learned that the model was penalizing resumes that actually contain the word woman. And this was really just a result of a biased training set where, most of the company's management positions were male. And the model can only know as much as it's trained, right? As much as you show it. So if you show it a biased training data set, then that is what it's going to learn, and that's what it's going to pick up on, and it's going to perpetuate, the issues that we already see in the field today. And some less obvious examples are, again, with the resume screening tools, you can try to, control for that. So I think like the woman, finding the term woman, that's an obvious example, right? But then there's also some more hidden examples where the algorithms were learning to look for specific vocabulary, like it was executed. The word executed was a good word on a resume, but that also happened to be a word that was predominantly only used by males. But that's not necessarily something you would connect the dots on paper, right? You wouldn't. You may not actually realize that that's an issue. But if you rely on these algorithms to learn the patterns based off of the biased data set, then these kind of scenarios will arise, and without having a human in the loop, someone else, trying to review and screen that, you might end up with an extremely biased pool of candidates because you started out with that biased data training set.
And, as the father of a daughter, I know that the STEM field tends to be kind of underrepresented. I'm just curious, like the lived experience of being in the field. Do you often find yourself, alone in the room? Like, how does that work? Just emotionally and logistically for you?
Yeah, I would say again throughout my career, I've been in a diverse, different industries, but throughout my entire career, I've almost always been, the only female in a room. In most of my meetings, that's just kind of what I've become accustomed to. And, obviously it's not my favorite, but I think that all we can do is try to, be aware of that and just to try to encourage leaders and individuals to be open to having more diversity. It's definitely something that is still lacking in the STEM field, and again, you can see the symptoms of it coming out in models as well as just my day-to-day, right?
Yeah, Ariel Biscayart said sometimes being in a male-dominated area is great. I think one of the risks when you don't have all the voices represented is, there's two aspects to creating AI, and I'm going to actually talk about this in a bit. But there's the creation of the AI brain, and then the training of that brain. And there's a lot of challenges around making the brain, that original model that's trained on massive amounts of data, less biased. And we see this in the most extreme way with facial recognition, where it just is not good at recognizing dark-skinned faces. And so, really what Annie, I think, when we were preparing for this, was talking about is making that original brain a better reflection of the actual society, rather than having to kind of train out the biases after the fact. And that's a really vibrant, difficult, challenging conversation in AI right now, because it's so expensive to make the brain, and you can only make brains so often. And then there's the implementation of it, where you're watching out for emergent properties and training it with the thumbs up, thumbs down, and reinforcing good things and eliminating bad ones. But it's a game of whack-a-mole. Whereas if you can get it right from the start, such as right is, it can actually solve for a lot of the biggest fears and risks, perhaps, from AI amongst researchers. So I'd love for you to just reflect on that aspect, which is the conversation that's happened inside of the field about how to create a brain that is more reflective of our society rather than certain elements of our society.
Yeah, I think that, it all comes back to starting out with having a diverse and representative training data set. These models only know as much as we are telling them to learn, right? So they're only seeing what we show them. And I think it's important to remember humans are building these models, right? We decide, we're telling them what is right and what is wrong based off of the data that we feed them. And so it really starts with us kind of recognizing these unconscious biases, and then, putting in extra effort to make sure that what we're training them with is diverse and representative of our society. And again, just really, it comes back to having a human in the loop and having more diverse people also be part of this process, so that we can help actively review and screen these models and notice these issues before it's too late. And I think that it really, the more diverse the people who are involved in trying to build these models, the better we can kind of see and spot these issues and try to address them before it's too late.
Yeah, well, from the bottom of my heart, thank you for your time, and thank you for sharing. And I hope my daughter grows up to be just like you.
Oh, thank you so much.
You're welcome. So speaking of incredible women, I'd love to welcome Nicole up. Nicole's going to share with us a couple of different tools that she uses to do AI for data. And then we'll be wrapping up with some exciting news and exciting announcements.
Okay, I'm going to try to do this as quickly as possible. And I'm going to share with you Microsoft BI. And I know this is used in businesses that are smaller and not super small, but I've worked with companies and they use Microsoft BI, and this is business intelligence. And I would always have to ask a developer to make the reports for me, because they would have to know how to code to pull it out of a SQL database, and I couldn't just do it myself. And I went to the Microsoft conference last week virtually, and this was in one of the sessions, and this is something that I was really excited about, and this is how they have integrated Copilot into BI, and this is like baby steps into understanding your analytics of your business a bit better. So I'm just going to go ahead and play this, and I do hope that the sound comes through. Let me know if it's not, like raise your hand, Dan.
And still interact directly with the Power BI. Copilot in Power BI is empowering everyone to quickly find and share insights. For example, say I'm a sales analyst for a hotel and resorts company. Now with Copilot and Power BI, I can simply describe the report I want to build and get insights in seconds. Maybe we need a new report to help us understand the profile of our customers, to gain insights into what is driving return visits to our properties. I just describe what I need, and Copilot will automatically analyze my data and create a new report based on my needs. Immediately, Copilot created a new Power BI report that is fully interactive, and I can start slicing and dicing my data to explore deeper. Copilot added the charts and slicers I requested, but also conveniently gives me options to adjust the output to get just what I'm looking for. For example, let's switch to ask for metrics and trends and a slightly different layout. Automatically, Copilot updates the report. Let's go ahead and keep this report page, but it goes much further. I can also ask analysis questions such as, what are the main drivers for repeat customer visits? Copilot responds by adding a new page to my report and uses Power BI's built-in advanced analysis capabilities for finding key influencers for variables in my data. Right away, I can see that customers who purchase spa visits are the most likely to be repeat visitors, followed by those who rented sports equipment. I can easily explore Power BI's key influencer visual further to learn more. I can even automatically see the most significant segments in my data just by clicking. Now let's go back to the first page and finish up our new report. I'm going to ask Copilot to make it look like our existing sales dashboard. Copilot automatically finds and references the dashboard to adjust my report with formatting and layout to match. Best of all, I can still interact directly with the Power BI report Copilot has created. So for example, if I wanted to manually change this line chart to add the reason customers were visiting, it's easy to do with just a few clicks. Let's also change the line chart to a ribbon chart to make the data really stand out. Finally, to make the report even easier for my team to understand, I'm going to ask Copilot to add a rich text description of my data right inside the report. This narrative summary is fully dynamic, and not only does Copilot highlight interesting insights for my data, but it provides citations from where in the report the data was taken. This summary will update every time the data is refreshed, or people filter the report with new insights based on the data. And just like that, in seconds, I've created a report that would have taken hours or days to do manually. Copilot, built on top of Azure OpenAI, is truly revolutionary for...
Okay, so we had questions. Does this work? Like, do you have to be in Microsoft environment to do it? And you absolutely do for their Power BI because it's a Microsoft tool. And there are other tools that do this with your data that you can pull it into. Now, Monkey Learn has been around since, I don't know, 2015 or maybe even earlier. And now Monkey Learn has this sort of ability as well where it pulls in your data. And Monkey Learn is relatively affordable too, and it will give you those customer insight kind of reports as well. And they have been using AI for a lot of different functions for nearly a decade. So there are a number of tools, but Monkey Learn, it doesn't matter where your data is, it can pull it in. So this is something that anybody can use. And they're known for being super flexible of what information they'll pull in. So this is the analytics, like we talked about the different kind of analysis. This isn't predictive. This is your past customer behavior. This is what has been going on. And I want to get into predictive a little bit more. I'm going to share a different screen. And so this is a big tool that can feel overwhelming to some people and contains a lot of information. I'm going to get down to a specific predictive tool that is still kind of a bit more expensive and super powerful. And then I'm going to get into something that you can try today for free that anybody can do. So I'm going to show you Visit right now. And Visit, it provides predictive analytics for images. It's so cool. And obviously we have less than 2 seconds to grab a consumer's attention. Right now, depending on the consumer and the age, it can be as little as 0.04 seconds to grab someone's attention. And we process these images very, very quickly. And imagine if you watch any young kids scrolling, they scroll so fast. And so having images that grab people's attention is really important. And in here, 88% of consumers consider the product image the key element of their online shopping experience. And 95% of consumers that click into a carousel view every image, and a carousel is the side swiping that has multiple images. And I mean, they say 95% of purchasing decisions happen subconsciously when you're processing visual information, and it's about the emotional connection that you have to the picture that you're seeing. And bad content is the #1 reason consumers don't convert online. And I want to say too, bad content isn't necessarily that it's not professionally produced, because in some environments, the more professionally done these photos are, the less they'll convert, and people want real humans using the products, and they'll convert more on those. But there's simple little tricks to the images that make them more compelling. And I love this example. So Master Lock had this original image of the safe. And in this original image, it got a score. The visit score is out of 100. It was 18.6. Then you put the image into the tool and it does this heat map and tells you the things you need to change. And it's kind of like Photoshop on the back end. And so they changed a few things. They changed the orientation. They opened the door a little bit more. They lit up the inside, and they put some items in there that were recognizable. And the visit score went up to 90.2, very high, a high likelihood that people would be visually engaged with the image and more likely to convert. So they got an increase, 30% increase in sales simply by changing this. And you look at the two pictures, they're not that different, but this is predictive analytics. And this is the power of predictive analytics. And they also got increased traffic and conversion. They work with a lot of big brands, and part of the contribution to the algorithm is picking who your customer is, and it creates an audience lens of who that customer is and produce it and gives you the image feedback based on who the customer is that you are trying to appeal to and different aspects about that person. So they get your audience data, then AI analyzes it, you get the image scores, and then you can see this back end, you can optimize it. And let's see, we'll go through here. They've been doing a lot of work with Harley Davidson. And this one, Heartfelt Happy Moms, is the audience lens. And you look at these images and the pictures don't look that different, but to get something that is highly converting by just changing out a few items, it's so incredibly simple. And this is where AI can be really powerful for us. By changing their images, you can see their score of the 14 on the right. They got a 54% increase in sales during this study period, and it's 71% increase in page views as well. And if you could just know what the right image is that will get people to buy, and you increase your sales by 54%, can you imagine the difference that would make for your business if you could run every image through here?
And this, this is replacing the kind of hard trial and error that you would do with Facebook advertising. And these scores, like the 98.6, 54.5, I'm seeing these being built in increasingly in all sorts of different software, whether it's measuring the likelihood of an image to convert, measuring the quality of a headline, like in the co-headliner tool that I love to use. It's really, I think it's going to become pretty standard, just like you'll see in like Netflix, it'll say, likelihood that you will enjoy this movie.
Yeah. And on this one, they're talking about the savings of Harley Davidson. They saved $5 million in operational expenses by using Visit AI. And they applied it to their motorcycle design process. So they could test these images to see what people would buy, and then actually design and produce motorcycles based on what their audience is going to like. I mean,
So,
yeah.
Thank you so much, Nicole. Was there anything else that you wanted to share?
Yeah, there's a bunch on Visit, but then the thing that you can go home and do right now is you can go to Opus. And Opus is a video tool, and we showed you this a couple weeks ago. You can go to Opus and you get this score that's the likelihood that it'll go viral, and you can simply apply it to any video that you upload on YouTube. I don't know where my window just went, because I took one of the BizHack videos, and okay, I'm gonna have to. Oh, I can't see my screen. But I took one of the BizHack videos and I put it in here. I just used the YouTube link, but it's in another window that I don't know where it went. And you can take your video, you can take raw video that's unedited, and you can upload it here. It applies the subtitles to it, and it tells you what you need to do. This one could benefit from a call to action, it says. You can also edit some of the copy in here, and it gives you the score. And so this is predictive analytics in a really basic and simple, everybody can use it kind of way. So if you go to Opus, Opus Pro AI, you can find it, but it's opus.pro, I believe. And this is one that you can simply play with on your own. So that is, I'll just leave it there. I have a lot more I can share, and we can do another session on that.
Well, the good news is we're going to get to that shortly about ways you can get more of Nicole's greatness. Jeff, I know you had mentioned a very accessible example of data with ChatGPT, as well as how a lot of these tools are being built into Google Ads as well.
Sure. Well, I'll keep this brief. I just thought this was fun. We talked a few lectures ago about emergent properties and language models, and I think mainly everybody on this call has spent some time with GPT. So I did just want to give a nod to that tool, which is really a large language model, but actually has emerged in its training to be able to do some basic predictive analytics. I'll give you this very simple example. You can go try it with some of your data. I just created a spreadsheet here of a fake business's cash flow by month. And essentially it's a very volatile graph. And I went to our good old friend ChatGPT using GPT-4 and actually just copied in the data from my diagram and asked it to predict the next values, and just told it this is my cash flow. ChatGPT then gave me a little bit of a lecture on how this is very hard and technically complex, and you need to hire a data scientist. But then it also analyzed my data and said that it was varying pretty wildly month to month. And so it was suggesting that the best form of forecasting we should do is a very basic approach called naive forecasting, where it essentially just uses the seasonality of year-over-year data to predict the output. It then predicted the next values of my cash flow statement, and again warned me that I should probably look a little deeper into data instead of just feeding this into a model. But what was interesting is if I paste that back here, it actually does a fairly good job of mirroring some of the similar ups and downs of this cash flow statement with some predictions in it. So I would asterisk this with a language model is not a purpose designed tool for doing this type of things. But if you want to go kick the tires and play around with GPT in a use case that you might not be aware of, go maybe paste some of your data and put that privacy setting on and see what kind of outputs it'll give you, because it can instruct you really well on the types of analysis you can do, and also do some of those very rudimentary projections as well.
Thank you for that. And then did you want to just quickly address Google Ads and the predictive features of Google Ads?
Yeah, so like you were mentioning before, I won't share this with you explicitly because I don't have it pulled up, but many of these tools from advertisers are starting to put in machine learning, language models, and prediction tools. And so if you're familiar with investing in paid search through Google advertising, Google has also rolled out a feature where it will live score your ad copy as you're creating it and give you suggestions on words to use and give you suggestions on adding more headlines or changing your descriptions based on some of those similar analyses of what they've seen work for click-through rate. So I would just keep your eyes open, and many of the tools that you are already using, you're probably going to see more of this stuff pop up.
Thank you. So I wanted to end on a little bit of a positive note. It's called PDOOM. So what is PDOOM? PDOOM is a term that's being thrown around a lot by AI researchers in Silicon Valley and data scientists everywhere. And another question a lot of these folks will say is, what are your timelines? And your timelines is, when does humanity go extinct because of AI? In a 2022 survey, they asked machine learning researchers, what is the probability that advanced AI systems will cause human extinction? And the median answer was 10%. So 10% of machine learning researchers, the median response was that there's a 10% likelihood of a PDOOM, or probability of doom scenario, due to AI. And there's actually a H.P. Lovecraft is a science fiction writer, and he created this kind of scary looking creature called the Shoggoth. And it's this octopus looking monster that has eyes all over the place. And one of the memes that took hold in Twitter shortly after ChatGPT was created was this simple line drawing. And it said, the Shoggoth is GPT. And the Shoggoth with a little mask on it, giving it a nice smiley face, is GPT with reinforcement learning with human feedback. You might remember we gave you the little thumbs up, thumbs down that you might have never noticed in ChatGPT. That is RLHF. That is the little smiley face. And this goes back to what I was saying with Annie, that the creation of the brain may be the Shoggoth, maybe this scary creature, and then we are just doing thumbs up and thumbs down with reinforcement learning to try to get it to, put on a happier face. This is what freaks out, among the things that freak out data scientists and machine learning experts, is we don't actually really know what we're making. The brain is really not predictable. It's a black box. It is something where we can't actually tell you why it does what it does. And a beautiful example of this is Jeff just showed us ChatGPT doing predictive forecasting. It was not taught how to do predictive forecasting. It learned it on its own as an emergent property, just like it learned 95 languages and dozens of coding languages and higher forms of math. That's the shoggoth. That's the big fear that people have. Just this week, the Center for AI Safety released a 22-word statement saying mitigating the risk of extinction from AI should be a global priority alongside other societal scale risks such as pandemics and nuclear war. And Jeffrey Hinton, the godfather of AI who just quit Google, Sam Altman, the CEO and co-founder of OpenAI, which created ChatGPT, and of course Grimes, the artist who is has children with Elon Musk, all of them signed this statement. And I think it's as we wrap up this first, this season of AI for marketing and sales, I think I do want to end on this cautionary note, a note in which this is an incredible tool to speed the growth of your business, but there are really big risks for society that are kind of above our pay grade, but we should keep an eye on nonetheless. Use these tools to grow your business, to get work done better and faster, leverage these tools, but also recognize that as a society, we need to take responsibility for making these tools, using them safely, using them responsibly, not allowing these tools to shut out people who otherwise would not have access, whether due to their gender, their ethnicity, their country of origin, their socioeconomics. And so I do not want to be that guy who is just rah AI. I want to sort of honor that some of the smartest people in the world are warning us against this. And I think it's kind of funny, they now have a tote bag with the shoggoth. What we're seeing is increasingly AI researchers are getting more and more brazen and courageous about just stating the risks. And so pay attention and then also use these tools to grow your business. So I wanted to wrap up. Today we had a really heady session. We talked about the difference between the glut of data and insight. We talked about predictive analytics, how it works, its history, how it works at Disney. And then we talked about the risks around bias. We showed you a couple of really powerful tools, Power BI by Microsoft, Visit, and even ChatGPT and how it can be used. It's being built into everything, starting with Google Ads and elsewhere. And then we talked about the kind of doomsday scenario, which is, 10% doomsday scenario is not very encouraging. I would not take those odds. And so wanted to give, Nicole and Jeff a chance to talk about what their big takeaways were from today. And then we're going to talk, for those of you who can stick around, about what's next, for those of you who are interested in how we can keep this journey going. Nicole?
Ahas for today. I think we need to look at our analytics more.
Amen to that.
Amen.
I mean, my big aha is that, set aside the BI, Power BI and the AI tools, being better at data-driven decision-making is one of the biggest weaknesses of most small businesses. And thank you for that, Nicole. And thank you for all of your contributions throughout. And Jeff, what was your big aha? Besides that you have the most incredible wife imaginable.
Yeah, exactly. I thought about getting a great 10-year anniversary gift and making sure I didn't get kicked out of the house. But in all seriousness, though, I think the biggest thing for me was hearing Annie talk about if you're resource constrained. I mean, she comes from a team that invests millions and millions of dollars in resources for this stuff. And to hear her reflect that probably the best thing to invest in as a business owner is a generalist was a really interesting insight, partly for me because I run a small business and I can't have 20 engineers. So it's good practical guidance, but I think it also just speaks to how volatile the domain is and how important it is to be generally educated on this technology and what it can be used for, and to use these tools than to necessarily try to build your own perfect AI in the walls of your company.
Perfect. Thank you. So I wanted to take now a minute, and a lot of you guys have been asking for implementation support. When we surveyed you over the last couple of sessions, we said, what's holding you back in using AI? You said integrating it into your processes, knowing what AI is good for, and the technical aspects of actually using it. What would you be interested in as potentially a next step from us? Step-by-step instruction on implementing AI in your business was the top response. Staying up to date with the latest on AI and a small group setting to do that. What would be most valuable to you is live sessions with individualized attention for how to use AI, exclusive workshops and webinars rather than these kind of mass webinars, and an AI newsletter with tips and tools. And what's stopping most of you is you don't know specifically how to implement AI in your particular business, or you don't have the time, enough time to dedicate to learning it. So, or an easy way to integrate it. And that really is sort of what led us to create a new offer, which we're going to be doing starting in June, which starts tomorrow is June. So we're going to begin introducing weekly implementation labs. These are 2 1-hour weekly labs. One of them is going to be run by me at BizHack. Another one's going to be run by Nicole and her team at AI Smart Marketing. And for these weekly implementation labs, we're going to be capping the potential attendance at 50. Not everyone's going to attend every lab, but you're going to have 8 hours of labs per month. We're also, Jeff and I are going to be doing a 2-hour bonus session, invite only, where he and I are going to continue our philosophical and technical conversation around AI. You will also get continued access to the recordings, which are going to go behind a paywall, with bonus materials such as access to the slides and extra resources. We're going to create a newsletter with the latest information and resources, and we're going to continue to grow our private LinkedIn group for AI for marketing. Now, these weekly implementation labs, Nicole is going to really focus on the tools. And so we're going to do sessions on ChatGPT, AI PRM, Jasper, Canva, Copilot, Duet, Bing AI, Google Bard, Midjourney, analytics tools. It's going to really be a very tools-based approach. And my weekly sessions are going to be more of an AMA, where I'm going to you're going to write questions ahead of time or submit them live during the session, and we're going to answer them and try to get you specific guidance for how to implement this in your business, and also some inspiration from other business owners. And then Jeff and I are going to really talk about some of the more headier implications of all this, how the technology works, how you can apply some of this technology in your business. If you go to bizhack.com/AI enroll, you can see the different offerings that we have. If you want to just access the course, have that as a lasting resource, we're going to continue to add to it. That's a one-time payment of $497. If you want to do the implementation labs, which is 8 hours of small group coaching plus access to the course plus the bonus sessions that we'll be organizing, that's a monthly subscription of $497. And then Nicole has a great course through AI Smart Marketing, which is a 10-week boot camp, and you can click there and register for that there. So we'll be sending you more information. I know we moved quickly through this after today's session, so keep an eye out for that email. Again, it's bizhack.com/AI enroll.
Yeah, so just one thing, Dan, because there's a little hyphen between AI and enroll.
Oh, okay. Perfect. And then I did want to add this parting thought. This is from Sundar Pichai, the CEO of Google. He said, AI is probably the most important thing humanity has ever worked on. I think of it as something more profound than electricity or fire. So with that, thank you guys. Thank you for taking this 7-session masterclass journey with us. Thank you, Nicole, and your whole team. Thanks, Mike and John and the rest of my team. And we look forward to seeing you on the implementation, how to use this in your own companies starting next month, starting in June, starting tomorrow. So thanks, everybody. And we look forward to seeing you guys in the implementation sessions that are to come.
Thank you.
Thank you, Nicole.